In my blog this morning, I wrote post 15 of 16 posts about learning. Excuse me, about lessons I've learned in 16 years of business. 16 posts, 16 days, 16 lessons, and I think that was Guy's brilliant idea that I should do that. Guy and Jenny had that idea. And so I've written 15 of them. Today's day 16, and so I decided that rather than writing day 16s today, I would announce it on this party, and I'll write about it this weekend on the Remarkable Learning blog. You can see the link to that if you don't know it. Let me go back, and Guy, you have to work with me now. I'm going to make you actually work that camera for a minute now. Today's post, the 15th post, I said use wisely your power of choice. And that's one of my all-time favorite quotes. It's from Og Mandino, one of my all-time favorite authors in perhaps my favorite book, The Greatest Miracle in the World, where he said, and I'll say it again, use wisely your power of choice. That was my 15th lesson, is about using wisely your power of choice. And in that post, I realized, as I was thinking about it and wanting to write about choice, I realized that in every other of the 14 other lessons, that choice was the key to all of them. So I'm just going to briefly, and I'm not going to read the posts to you, you don't want that. How much more time have we got on that camera, Guy?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay, I'll get this much of this done. I wrote about, I've written these posts, I wrote one about the value of writing and the importance of writing, and that's a choice if we make the time to choose to write. I wrote about a primer on celebrations, and we can choose to celebrate, or when we celebrate, and that sort of thing. I wrote about some advice about advice, and how you can choose to listen to that advice or not. I wrote about successes about relationships. We've talked about that with several of the guests. It's been one of the themes throughout the show, throughout the party. I wrote on day 5 about the dangers of dabbling, and we choose to dabble or we choose to dive in. It's a choice that we make. I wrote about the importance of innovation, and there's choice all over innovation and creativity. I wrote about being grateful, and that is 100% choice. I'm so grateful that there are people still here, and I love that, and thank you all so much for being here. I wrote about the 4 lessons in change. We certainly talked about change with Jeff and others, and we can choose to change because change is all around us. I wrote about reading, talked about that with Wally and with Phil just now, that reading, why we do it, why we should do it, and why we don't do it. And as Wally told us, we can choose to read. It's not going to happen automatically. We've got to choose to read. I talked about the starting point of all improvement, which is about believing. It's really what these bands are about. It's about the power of belief. And we can choose to believe that those that we lead have massive potential. We can choose to believe that we have massive potential. If we don't choose those things, we ain't going to get it. I wrote about making work play. We certainly talked about that over the last little bit. I talked about taking action, and we certainly all can choose to act. I talked about the power of and we talked about that with Kat, and the options and the power that and brings us. And I talked about the truth in our attitude in post 14, and we can all choose our attitude for sure. So that's the first 15 lessons. The 16th lesson I've hinted at all through the show. And the 16th lesson that I've learned in my business, and it's not something that I didn't know anything about or that you don't know anything about, but it's at the heart of all of it. And that is that as human beings, we truly are learning beings. And we can choose to learn, for sure. The 16th lesson, the most powerful thing I've learned in 16 years in business, is that everything that I've accomplished, or not, everything that we've achieved for our clients and with our clients, or not, everything that we've done, including this day, comes down to our ability and our willingness to be learners. In Remarkable Leadership, the first of the 13 competencies is that remarkable leaders are continual learners. In order for us to be successful, we've got to be continual learners. That doesn't mean we have to be continuous learners. Our minds wouldn't be able to handle that. We don't have to continuously eat, but we certainly better continually eat, because if we stop eating, we're not going to last very long. If we stop learning, we're going to stop growing. most of you know I grew up on a farm, or many of you know that I grew up on a farm. Probably time to put the John Deere hat on. I grew up on a farm, and that background of mine makes a big difference about who, says a lot about who I am. And when people ask me about how my farm background relates to what I do now, it relates to the fact that being on a farm, whether we're growing pig, growing corn, or growing sunflowers, growing wheat, it's about growing. And the business that I'm in now, that I have the great pleasure and honor to be in now, is about growing people and growing. And all of that starts with learning. All starts with learning. Every last bit of. And if you do what Phil told us a few minutes ago, learn one new thing, it'll make a difference in your life. If as a leader you want those around you to be learners, that's an example. So the 16th lesson, the last lesson of the 16 of the ones that I picked, I could have picked any of 100, is learning. And I urge you to become a continual learner.